Hello, and welcome back to A Chapter a Day, where a chapter a day keeps imagination at play and ignorance at bay. I switched it. Anyway, how are you all doing? I am your hostess, Miss Petals, and we are going to continue with Fahrenheit 451, and we may finish tonight. I don't know, but we shall see. First off, I'd like to say that I noticed in a lot of my videos that it cuts off at the end quick. Well, here's the thing. I am a noob at live stream, and I forgot that there is a lag time between real time and live stream time. So, I would always end my screen. Like right now, I'm looking at two screens. One is the OBS I'm using, and then there's the YouTube live stream I'm looking at right now. So I'm seeing two pictures of me. So the YouTube one is slow, but like the OBS is in like real time. So it always I end the YouTube before I end the OBS, and that's probably why you guys can't see my my outro, I should say. So I do apologize for that. I will get better. So I will wave goodbye. And when I see the other me on YouTube screen wave bye, that means I can shut off the end stream. I'm getting better, guys. I'm trying. I'm learning new things. So I promise I will learn to get better. So as you all know, if you guys are still following me, a Chapter a Day is sponsored by Seeds of Harvest Library, located 4121 Cleveland Street, Gary, Indiana, inside Market City, Friday and Sunday, 10:30 a.m. through 4 o'clock p.m., and Saturday, 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Donations are accepted. They only accept hardcover books only, and you can follow them through social media. So today I'm going to finish, but also, like we always do, we review. So where we left off is Montag is on the run. He visits Faber's house. Faber tells him to follow the railroad tracks, gives him his old clothes and a suitcase, and there is a new mechanical hound that we discover on Faber's small TV that is after him. And I guess this hound smells the scent of the person and like puts it in its system to find the person. And so the hound is chasing after him, and helicopters are chasing after him. He is literally a fugitive on the run. So, and they make a big game out of it. His world, his community, they make a big show out of it. I don't know if you guys remember from last time we read, they had everybody participate and say, we need to find this fugitive. Everybody look out your windows in the count of 10, or look out your doors in 10. Like, it was a big game. So before they count to 10, Faber is still back home. The hound didn't get to his house because the hound was about to track Montag at Faber's house, but Faber did a good job of disinfecting everything and washing Montag's scent out. And so now, before the people count to 10, Montag reached the river and is carried away out of the city. And before we begin, I want to go back to our last time, an episode of what we read last time about the crazy kids that almost killed him and wanted to kill him, driving and almost running him over. And they wanted to run him over because the car came back. Well, that episode, after we said goodbye to each other last time, um, I had received news. I was supposed to have class yesterday. It would have been my last class. And then I will be officially Dr. Smith. I'm excited about that. But anyway, class was canceled because my professor, who is also a pastor, he had to attend a family. He had to attend to a family because a young man in his church brother was killed by kids who drove up. They just drove up to the car. They drove up in their car and shot him. So it was a drive-by. The young man in his church is very distraught about it. And then I just found out today that a young man who went to a high school around here where I live, he was attending Indianapolis University and was shot in the head. They don't even know why, but people were just shooting, and he was shot and killed. And it made me go back to this episode of Fahrenheit 451 where the kids were trying to run over Montag, and it's like fiction is becoming reality. Because, like, even when me and my mom were talking about it, discussing about these incidences, and my professor, we were like, what is wrong with these kids? But my professor, who is also my goddad, was saying that we're in scary times right now and times of uncertainty. And that's all he could really say to us students. And it just made me go back, like, we are in Fahrenheit 451, in my opinion. You guys can disagree with me, but we are in the world, in this world. This is not fiction anymore, and it should be, but it's not. And that's what's really scary. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities to what we're reading, what's happening right now. And it seems like, just like the kids in the book, in Montag's world, it seems like kids don't care today. I'm not saying all of them, but it's like kids don't care anymore who they kill or who they hurt. And it's all about fun and entertainment. And doing things like that is fun and entertaining to them, which is scary to me. And it should be scary to a lot of people. They don't care about human life. It's like the value of human life is diminishing. Let me know what you guys think about that. And keep thinking about that as we continue to read. And I think we're almost done. But let's continue where we started off last time. He felt as if he had left a stage behind, and many actors. He felt as if he had left the great seance and all the murmuring ghosts. He was moving from an unreality that was frightening into a reality that was unreal because it was new. The black land slid by, and he was going into the country among the hills. For the first time in a dozen years, the stars were coming out above him in great processions of wheeling fire. He saw a great juggernaut of stars form in the sky and threaten to roll over and crush him. He floated on his back when the valleys filled and sank. The river was mild and leisurely, going away from the people who are shadows for breakfast, and steam for lunch, and vapors for supper. The rivers was very real. It held him comfortably and gave him the time at last, the leisure to consider this month, this year, and a lifetime of years. He listened to his heart slow. His thoughts stopped, rushing with his blood. He saw the moon low in the sky now. The moon there, and the light of the moon caused by what? By the sun, of course. And what lights the sun? Its own fire? And the sun goes on day after day, burning and burning. The sun and time, the sun and time, and burning, burning. The river bobbled him along gently, burning. The sun and every clock on the earth, it all came together and became a single thing in his mind. After a long time of floating on the land and a short time of floating in the river, he knew why he must never burn again in his life. The sun burned every day. It burnt time. The world rushed in a circle and turned on its axis, and time was busy burning the years and the people anyway, without any help from him. So if he burned things with the firemen and the sun burned time, that meant that everything burned. One of them had to stop burning. The sun wouldn't, certainly. So it looked as if it had to be Montag, and the people he had worked with until a few short hours ago. Somewhere the saving and putting away had to begin again, and someone had to do the saving and keeping, one way or another, in books, in records, in people's heads, anyway, at all, so long as it was safe, free from moths, silverfish, rust, and dry rot, and men with matches. The world was full of burning of all types and sizes. Now the guild of the asbestos weaver must open shop very soon. He felt his heel bump land, touch pebbles and rocks, scrape sand. The river had moved him toward shore. He looked in at the great black creature without eyes or light, without shape, with only a size that went 1,000 miles, without wanting to stop, with its grass hills and forests that were waiting for him. He hesitated to leave the comforting flow of the water. He expected the hound there. Suddenly the trees might blow under a great wind of helicopters. But there was only the normal autumn wind, high up, going by like another river. Why wasn't the hound running? Why had the search veered inland? This country here, listen to it. Nothing and nothing. So much silence, Millie. I wonder how you'd take it. Would you shout? Shut up! Shut up! Millie, Millie. And he was sad. Millie was not here, and the hound was not here, but the dry smell of hay blowing from some distant field put Montag on. Hold on a second, guys. Sorry, I got a pop-up message from YouTube saying they're not getting enough stream. It is pretty windy where I'm from. It has been windy all day, guys. That's fall for you. But I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to keep moving anyway. Where was I? Millie was not here, and the hound was not here, but the dry smell of hay blowing from some distant field put Montague on the land. He remembered a farm he had visited when he was very young. One of the rare few times he discovered that somewhere behind the seven veils of unreality, beyond the walls of parlors and beyond the tin moat of the city, cows chewed grass and pigs sat in warm ponds at noon and dogs barked after white sheep on a hill. Now the dry smell of hay, the motion of the waters made him think of sleeping in fresh hay in a lonely barn away from the loud highways, behind a quiet farmhouse and under an ancient windmill. That word like the sound of the passing years overhead. He lay in the high barn loft all night, listening to distant animals and insects and trees, the little motions and stirrings. During the night, he thought below the loft he would hear a sound like feet. Moving perhaps, he would tense and sit up. The sound would move away. He would lie back and look out the loft window every late in the night and see the lights go out in the farmhouse itself until a very young and beautiful woman would sit in an unlit window braiding her hair. It would be hard to see her, but her face would be like the face of the girl so long ago in his past now. So very long ago, the girl who had known the weather had and never been burned by the fireflies. The girl who had known that what dandelions meant rubbed off on your chin. Then she would be gone from the warm window and appear again upstairs in her moon whitened room. And then to the sound of death, the sound of the jets cutting the sky in two black pieces beyond the horizon, he would lie in the loft, hidden and safe, watching those strange new stars over the rim of the earth, fleeing from the soft color of dawn. In the morning, he would not have needed sleep, for all the warm odors and sights of a complete country night would have rested and slept him, while his eyes were wide and his mouth, when he thought to test it, was half a smile. And there at the bottom of the hayloft stair, waiting for him, would be the incredible thing. He would step carefully down in the pink light of early morning, so fully aware of the world that he would be afraid and stand over the small miracle and at last bend to touch it. A cool glass of fresh milk and a few apples and pears laid at the foot of the steps. This was all he wanted now. Some sign that the immense world would accept him and give him the long time he needed to think all the things that must be thought. A glass of milk, an apple, a pear. He stepped from the river. The land rushed at him, a tidal wave. He was crushed by darkness and the look of the country and the million odors on a wind that iced his body. He fell back under the breaking curve of darkness. And sound and smell, his ears roaring. He whirled, the stars poured over his sight like flaming meteors. He wanted to plunge in the river again and let it idle him safely on down somewhere. This dark land rising was like that day in his childhood, swimming, when from nowhere the largest wave in the history of remembering slammed him down in salt, mud, and green darkness. Water burning mouth and nose, retching his stomach, screaming, "Too much water! Too much land!" Out of the black wall before him, a whisper, a shape, in the shape of two eyes, the night looking at him, the forest seeing him. The hound! After all the running and rushing and sweating it out and half drowning to come this far, work this hard, and think yourself safe, and sigh with relief and come out on the land at last only to find the hound. Montag gave one last agonized shout, as if this were too much for any man. The shape exploded away, the eyes vanished, the leaf piles flew up in a dry shower. Montag was alone in the wilderness. A deer. He smelled the heavy musk like perfume mingled with blood, and the gummed exhalation of the animal's breath, all cardamom and moss and ragweed odor in this huge night where the trees ran at him. Pulled away to the pulse of the heart behind his eyes. There must have been a billion leaves on the land. He waded in them. He waded in them, a dry river smelling of hot cloves and warm dust and the other smells. There was a smell like a cut potato from all the land, raw and cold and white, from having the moon on it most of the night. There was a smell like pickles from a bottle and a smell like parsley on the table at home. There was a faint yellow odor like mustard from a jar. There was a smell like carnations from the yard next door. He put down his hand and felt a weed rise up like a child brushing him. His fingers smelled of licorice. He stood breathing, and the more he breathed the land in, the more he was filled up with all the details of the land. He was not empty. There was more than enough here to fill him. There would always be more than enough. He walked in the shallow tide of leaves, stumbling, and in the middle of the strangeness a familiarity. His foot hit something that rang dully. He moved his hand on the ground, a yard this way, a yard that. The railroad track. The track that came out of the city and rusted across the land through forest and woods deserted now by the river. Here was the path to wherever he was going. Here was the single familiar thing, the magic charm he might need a little while to touch, to feel beneath his feet, as he moved on into the bramble bushes and the lakes of smelling and feeling and touching among the whispers and the blowing down of leaves. He walked on the track, and he was surprised to learn how certain he suddenly was of a single fact he could not prove. Once, long ago, Clarice had walked here, where he was walking now. Half an hour later, cold and moving carefully on the tracks, fully aware of his entire body, his face, his mouth, his eyes stuffed with blackness, his ears stuffed with sound, his legs prickled with burrs and needles, he saw the fire ahead. The fire was gone, then back again, like a winking eye. He stopped, afraid he might blow the fire out with a single breath. But the fire was there, and he approached warily from a long way off. It took the better part of 15 minutes before he drew very close indeed to it, and then he stood looking at it from cover that small motion. The white and red color, a strange fire because it meant a different thing to him. It was not burning, it was warming. He saw many hands held to its warmth, hands without arms, hidden in darkness. Above the hands, motionless faces that were only moved and tossed and flickered with firelight. He hadn't known fire could look this way. He had never thought in his life that it could give as well as take. Even its smell was different. How long he stood, he did not know. But there was a foolish and yet delicious sense of knowing himself as an animal come from the forest, drawn by the fire. He was a thing of brush and liquid eye, of fur and muzzle and hoof. He was a thing of horn and blood that would smell like autumn if you bled it out on the ground. He stood a long, long time listening to the warm crackle of the flames. There was a silence gathered all about that fire, and the silence was in the men's faces, and time was there, time enough to sit by this rusting track under the trees and look at the world and turn it over with the eyes, as if it were held to the center of the bonfire. A piece of steel these men were all shaping. It was not only the fire that was different, it was the silence. Montag moved toward this special silence that was concerned with all of the world. And then the voices began, and they were talking, and he could hear nothing of what the voices said, but the sound rose and fell quietly, and the voices were turning the world over. And looking at it, the voices knew the land and the trees and the city which lay down the track by the river. The voices talked of everything. There was nothing they could not talk about. He knew from the very cadence and motion and continual stir of curiosity and wonder in them. And then one of the men looked up and saw him for the first or perhaps the seventh time, and a voice called to Montag, "All right. You can come out now." Montag stepped back in the shadows. "It's all right," the voice said. "You're welcome here." Montag walked slowly toward the fire, and the 5 old men sitting there dressed in dark blue denim pants and jackets and dark blue shirts. He did not know what to say to them. "Sit down," said the man who seemed to be the leader of the small group. "Have some coffee." He watched the dark steaming mixture pour into a collapsible tin cup, which was handed him straight off. He sipped it gingerly and felt them looking at him with curiosity. His lips were scalded, but that was good. The faces around him were bearded, but the beards were clean, neat, and their hands were clean. They had stood up as if to welcome a guest, and now they sat down again. Montag sipped. "Thanks," he said. "Thanks very much." "You're welcome, Montag. My name's Granger." He held out a small bottle of colorless fluid. "Drink this, too. It'll change the chemical index of your perspiration. Half an hour from now, you'll smell like 2 other people. With the hound after you, the best thing is bottoms up." Montag drank the bitter fluid. "You'll stink like a bobcat, but that's all right," said Granger. "You know my name?" said Montag. Granger nodded to a portable battery TV set by the fire. "We've watched the chase. Figured you'd wind up south along the river when we heard you plunging around out in the forest like a drunken elk. We didn't hide as we usually do. We figured you were in the river when the helicopter cameras swung back in over the city. Something funny there. The chase is still running. The other way, though." "The other way?" "Let's have a look." Granger snapped the portable viewer on. The picture was a nightmare. Condensed, easily passed from hand to hand in the forest, all whirling color and flight. A voice cried, "The chase continues north in the city. Police helicopters are converging on Avenue 87 and Elm Grove Park." Granger noted, "They're faking. You threw them off at the river. They can't admit it. They know they can hold their audience only so long. The show's got to have a snap ending, quick. If they started searching the whole damn river, it might take all night. So they're sniffing for a scapegoat to end things with a bang. Watch, they'll catch Montag in the next few minutes. Sounds like our news media, right, folks? But how? Watch. The camera hovering in the belly of a helicopter now swung down at an empty street. See that? Whispered Granger. It'll be you. Right up at the end of that street is our victim. See how our camera in coming in? Building the scene, suspense, long shot. Right now, some poor fellow is out for a walk. A rarity. An odd one. Don't think the police don't know the habits of queer ducks like that. Men who walk mornings for the hell of it or for reasons of insomnia. Anyway, the police have had him charted for months, years. Never know when that sort of information might be handy, and today it turns out it's very usable indeed. It saves face. Oh God, look there. The men at the fire bent forward. On the screen, a man turned a corner. The mechanical hound rushed forward into the viewer. Suddenly, the helicopter light shot down a dozen brilliant pillars that built a cage all about the man. A voice cried, "There's Montag! The search is done!" The innocent man stood bewildered, a cigarette burning in his hand. He stared at the hound, not knowing what it was. He probably never knew. He glanced up at the sky and the wailing sirens. The camera rushed down. The hound leapt up into the air with a rhythm and a sense of timing that was incredibly beautiful. Its needle shot out. It was suspended for a moment in their gaze, as if to give the vast audience time to appreciate everything. The raw look of the victim's face, the empty street, the street animal, a bullet nosing the target. "Montag, don't move," said a voice from the sky. The camera fell upon the victim, even as did the hound. Both reached him simultaneously. The victim was seized by hound and camera in a great spidering, clenching grip. He screamed, he screamed, he screamed! Blackout. Silence. Darkness. Montag cried out in the silence and turned away. Silence. And then after a time of the men sitting around the fire, their faces expressionless, an announcer on the dark screen said, "The search is over. Montag is dead. A crime against society has been avenged." Darkness. "We now take you to the sky room of the Hotel Lux for a half hour of Just Before Dawn, a program of—" Granger turned it off. They didn't show the man's face in focus. Did you notice? Even your best friends couldn't tell if it was you. They scrambled it just enough to let the imagination take over. "Hell," he whispered. "Hell." Montag said nothing, but now looking back, sat with his eyes fixed to the black screen, trembling. Granger touched Montag's arm. "Welcome back from the dead." Montag nodded. Granger went on. "You might as well know all of us now. This is Fred Clement, former occupant of the Thomas Hardy Chair at Cambridge, in the years before it became an atomic engineering school. This other is Dr. Simmons from UCLA, a specialist in Ortega y Gasset. Professor West here did quite a bit for ethics, an ancient study now, for Columbia University quite some years ago. Reverend Pedover here gave a few lectures 30 years ago and lost his flock between one Sunday and the next for his views. He's been bumming with us some time now. Myself, I wrote a book called The Fingers in the Glove, the proper relationship between the individual and society. And here I am. Welcome, Montag." I don't belong with you, said Montague at last slowly. I've been an idiot all the way. We're used to that. We all made the right kind of mistakes, or we wouldn't be here. When we were separate individuals, all we had was rage. I struck a fireman when he came to burn my library years ago. I've been running ever since. You want to join us, Montague? Yes. What have you to offer? Nothing. I thought I had part of the book of Ecclesiastes and maybe a little of Revelation, but I haven't even that now. The book of Ecclesiastes would be fine. Where was it? Here. Montague touched his head. Ah, Granger smiled and nodded. What's wrong? Isn't that all right? Said Montague. Better than all right. Perfect. Granger turned to the Reverend. Do we have a book of Ecclesiastes? One, a man named Harris in Youngstown. Montague. Granger took Montague's shoulder firmly. Walk carefully. Guard your health. If anything should happen to Harris, you are the book of Ecclesiastes. See how important you've become in the last minute? But I've forgotten. No, nothing's ever lost. We have ways to shake down your clinkers for you. But I've tried to remember. Don't try. It'll come when we need it. All of us have photographic memories, but spend a lifetime learning how to block off the things that are really in there. Simmons here has worked on it for 20 years, and now we've got the method down to where we can recall anything that's been read once. Would you like someday, Montague, to read Plato's Republic? Of course. I am Plato's Republic. Like to read Marcus Aurelius? Mr. Simmons is Marcus. How do you do? Said Mr. Simmons. Hello, said Montague. I want you to meet Jonathan Swift, the author of that evil political book Gulliver's Travels. And the other fellow is Charles Darwin, and this one is Schaffner, and this one is Einstein, and this one here at my elbow is Mr. Albert Schweitzer. Excuse me, y'all. A very kind philosopher indeed. Here we all are, Montague. Aristophanes and Mahatma Gandhi and Gautama Buddha and Confucius and Thomas Love Peacock and Thomas Jefferson and Mr. Lincoln, if you please. We are also Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Everyone laughed quietly. It can't be, said Montague. It is, replied Granger, smiling. We're book burners, too. We read the books and burnt them, afraid they'd be found. Microfilming didn't pay off. We were always traveling. We didn't want to bury the film and come back later. Always the chance of discovery. Better to keep it in the old heads where no one can see it or suspect it. We are all bits and pieces of history and literature and international law. Byron, Tom Paine, Machiavelli, or Christ. It's here. And the hour's late, and the war's begun. And we are out here, and the city is there, all wrapped up in its own coat of 1,000 colors. What do you think, Montague? I think I was blind, trying to go to things my way, planting books in firemen's houses and sending in alarms. You did what you had to do, carried out on a national scale. It might have worked beautifully, but our way is simpler, and we think better. All we want to do is keep the knowledge we think we will need intact and safe. We're not out to incite or anger anyone yet. For if we are destroyed, the knowledge is dead, perhaps for good. We are model citizens in our own special way. We walk the old tracks, we lie in the hills at night, and the city people let us be. We're stopped and searched occasionally, but there's nothing on our persons to incriminate us. The organization is flexible, very loose and fragmentary. Some of us have had plastic surgery on our faces and fingerprints. Right now, we have a horrible job. We're waiting for the war to begin and as quickly end. It's not pleasant, but then we're not in control. We're the odd minority, crying in the wilderness. When the war's over, perhaps we can be of some use in the world. Do you really think they'll listen then? If not, we'll just have to wait. We'll pass the books on to our children by word of mouth and let our children wait in turn on the other people. A lot will be lost that way, of course, but you can't make people listen. They have to come around in their own time, wondering what happened and why the world blew up under them. It can't last. How many of you are there? Thousands on the road, the abandoned rail tracks tonight, bums on the outside, libraries inside. It wasn't planned at first. Each man had a book he wanted to remember and did. Then, over a period of 20 years or so, we met each other traveling and got the loose network together and set out a plan. The most important single thing we had to pound into ourselves is that we were not important. We mustn't be pedants. We were not to feel superior to anyone else in the world. We're nothing more than dust jackets for books, of no significance otherwise. Some of us live in small towns. Chapter 1 of Thoreau's Walden in Green River. Chapter 2 in Willow Farm, Maine. Why, there's one town in Maryland. Only 27 people. No bomb will ever touch that town. Is the complete essay of a man's named Bertrand Russell. Pick up that town almost and flip the pages so many pages to a person, and when the war's over someday, some year, the books can be written again. The people will be called in one by one to recite what they know and will set it up in type until another dark age when we might have to do the whole damn thing over again. But that's the wonderful thing about man. Hold on, guys. I forgot to get my charger for my laptop. Hold on a second. Come on, you come back. Crap. My screen has gone. Ah, great. Sorry, guys. Just when I had to put on my charger, my camera went out. So I'll have to use my crappy laptop one. I do apologize. If it ain't one thing, it's another. Am I right? Let me fix this so you guys can see me. If it ain't one thing, it's another. That's why it's called life. Sometimes life don't work the way you want it to. So let me go back here. So I'm sorry if my camera is flickering. I'm on my laptop now. Cause yeah, I'm just gonna continue, guys. I'll figure out the camera situation later. But that's what's but that's the wonderful thing about man. He never go he never gets so discouraged or disgusted that he gives up doing it all over again because he knows very well it is important and worth the doing. What do we do tonight? Asked Montag. Wait, said Granger, and moved downstream a little ways just in case. He began throwing dust and dirt in the fire. The other men helped, and Montag helped, and there, in the wilderness, the men all moved their hands, putting out the fire together. They stood by the river in the starlight. Montag saw the luminous dial of his waterproof 5 o'clock in the morning. Another year ticked by in a single hour, and dawn waiting beyond the far bank of the river. Why do you trust me? Said Montag. A man moved in the darkness. The look of you's enough. You haven't seen yourself in a mirror lately. Beyond that, the city has never cared so much about us to bother with an elaborate chase like this to find us. A few crackpots with verses in their heads can't touch them. And they know it. And we know it. Everyone knows it. So long as the vast population doesn't wander about quoting the Magna Carta and the Constitution, it's all right. The firemen were enough to check that now and then. No, the cities don't bother us, and you look like hell. They moved along the bank of the river going south. Montag tried to see the men's faces, the old faces he remembered from the firelight, lined and tired. He was looking for a brightness, a resolve, a triumph over tomorrow that hardly seemed to be there. Perhaps he had expected their faces to burn and glitter. With the knowledge they carried to glow as lanterns glow with the light in them, but all the light had come from the campfire, and these men had seemed no different than any others who had run a long race, searched a long search, seen good things destroyed, and now very late were gathered to wait for the end of the party and blowing out of the lamps. They weren't at all certain that the things they carried in their heads might make every future dawn glow with a purer light. They were sure of nothing, save that the books were on file behind their quiet eyes. The books were waiting with their pages uncut for the customers who might come by in later years, some with clean and some with dirty fingers. Montag squinted from one face to another as they walked. Don't judge a book by its cover, someone said, and they all laughed quietly, moving downstream. We're going to stop right there for today. Man, guys, what books would you guys be if you guys were in that situation? You can't have a physical book, you have to memorize it. I think I would be fairy tales and um maybe Joshua, the book of Joshua. I don't know. I mean, I was never really good at memorizing scripture even when I was young, but I was always good at paraphrasing. But I like the fact that Granger said that you didn't have to like memorize, like, because Montag, he tried to memorize it but it wouldn't stick. But Granger would say it's still in you. I'm paraphrasing. It's still in you, but it'll come out when it needs to. And that's what happens to me when I try to remember the word of God. It doesn't stick at first, but when the time comes, I remember it. Like, for example, getting a little personal for me. I am so sorry this camera is so weak. I'm using my laptop one because the webcam went off. I think I might stick to the Droid cam, but anyway, um this week I was thinking about the future and where this place is, like, where is this world going and where is this country going, and it gets really upsetting. And you know I was thinking, well, you guys don't know what I'm thinking, but I was thinking about the end times and Christians being beheaded for what they believe and whatnot. Like, just things going bad. I mean, shoot, we just read that there was even Christians in that group of vagabonds, and they were in hiding along with several other people. And the Lord gave me several scriptures. There's one, I just can't remember the word, and I know it's in Proverbs, but there's one that I know by heart. He actually gave me three. I know Joshua 1:9, which is, be strong and courageous. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord is with you wherever you go. And that one stuck. And the Proverbs one, but I just missed one word. It's she's clothed in dignity and strength, and she laughs despite of the future. But I know despite's not the word, but it's in Proverbs. And I know the one from Psalms, but I just can't remember the chapter and verse. It's be still and know that I am the Lord. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know what book I know the fairy tales by heart, but I don't know what books I'd be. So what do you guys think? What books you guys think you would be if you were in that situation? Like, what books would you guys think you would memorize? And let me know. Let me know. But I thank you guys so much for watching me. We're still I think we're getting close to the end. But let me know what you guys think about these group of men. Like, they're all named after books that they have memorized. And that's all they do is hold the information and keep moving. Like, they move in a group and they migrate, and they're waiting for war to happen. Like, they're waiting for the war to wipe out those people, and I guess they inherit the earth. Would you be one of those people, or would you be ones fighting, or be like Montag? Let me know. And one thing I want to leave you guys with is, even though our world is scary right now and things don't make any sense, be strong and courageous and know that God is in control, and this is not a fleshly battle, it's a spiritual battle that's going on. And I see, like, after reading this, like, why the word of God is so important and why we should try to memorize it or know some of the verses or scriptures, that because it gives strength, it's life. And there's this one other scripture, like, that comes to my mind when Granger is telling Montag that, you know, the books will pretty much survive here. And there's a scripture, I don't know the verse or the chapter, but it's saying that it says that my word shall pass away. I think I have it on my phone. Hold on, because I want to give it to you guys for you to meditate on it, dwell on it, think about it. Give me a second. But the word of the Lord endureth forever, and this is the word which by the gospel is preached unto you. For all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower withereth, falleth away. Now, what is that? It doesn't tell me. Y'all can comment and tell me where that from, where the scripture, the verse in the book, where is that from? But what I was thinking of, heaven and earth will pass away, but the word of God shall remain. So I want you all to think about that. I want you to think about, if books were gone, what book would you be if you had to memorize a book and pass it on? And the scripture that I just read. So until next time, this is Miss Petals with a chapter a day. And remember, a chapter a day keeps ignorance at bay and imagination at play. See you soon. And I will try to get our camera working. See you guys.